specifically in this case, for this year, our theme is refine and assess our conference structures. That's exciting, right? Now, because refine and assess doesn't exactly automatically inspire or capture the imagination, I'm grateful that the annual conference planning team chose us as a scriptural touchstone the passage from 1 Samuel, chapter 17, verses 38 through 40. Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. And David strapped Saul's sword over the armor, and he tried in vain to walk, for he was not used to them. And then David said to Saul, "I cannot walk with these, for I am not used to them." So David removed them, and then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in his shepherd's bag in the pouch. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
In this passage, David prepares to face the giant Goliath. But first, he is compelled to try on Saul's armor. In this story, David is, in short order, required to assess and refine his strategy for facing the giant. And rather than facing the enemy with chainmail and helmet and sword, David opts for what suits him, for what fits him. He opts for what he's familiar with and what he's competent in. 5 smooth stones. And as is important for us to be reminded of as an annual conference, David is a young man, possibly even a boy. He is little, he is small. And Goliath is a giant, he is enormous. David does not need to be reminded. David understands full well the giant that stands out in the field. This is no illusion, this is no imaginary threat. David has a clear-eyed, firm-handed grip on reality. He knows what he's up against, and he knows what giant waits for him. But the greatest part about David's wisdom in this story, in this moment of assessing and refining, is he knows himself. He knows what fits. He knows what suits him well. And fundamentally, David has the courage, the confidence, not just to know those things, but to say that, to flat out refuse and cast off the requirements and the expectations of his king, and set aside the very things that King Saul is convinced, absolutely convinced, that David needs, the things that he must have in order to face that giant. And David chooses 5 smooth stones to face the giant. People of the New Mexico Annual Conference, what is the giant that waits for us? What is the giant that waits for you in your local ministry setting, in your communities, in your mission field? Well, I don't know how you might answer that. Let me see if I get close. There's the giant of a culture shifting away from the church and so-called organized religion. There is, in some of our communities, the giant of shifting demographics and population decline. Did you know that almost 1/3 of our churches are in communities that saw 0 or negative population growth since 2010? I'll say that again. 1/3 of our churches are in counties that saw either no population growth in the last 8 years or negative population growth in the last 8 years. There's the giant that is the current crisis in the United Methodist Church, the giant called the Way Forward. There's the giant of General Conference. And then there are the generalized giants of uncertainty and anxiety and fearfulness and despair and despondency and doubt about what the future might hold for any of us or all of us. Friends, we must have a clear-eyed, firm-handed grip on our reality. We don't have time for facing make-believe or pretend or what might happen if giants. The real ones are enemy enough. The real ones are enemy enough. And friends, like David, we have to know ourselves, and I mean really really know ourselves. We have to have no illusions about who we are in our local churches and as an annual conference. We have to know what we are called and equipped and gifted to do and what tools will serve us best when we face our giants. We are a small annual conference. We are a small annual conference made up mostly of small congregations in mostly small communities. That's the truth. That's our reality. On an average Sunday in our area, in an average United Methodist church, there are fewer than 80 people in worship. Even our largest congregation in the conference would be considered mid-sized in other annual conferences. Our largest metropolitan areas, Albuquerque and El Paso, aren't in the top 50 metropolitan areas in the country. We are a small annual conference with mostly small churches and mostly small communities. And it has always been that way. We have always been a smaller annual conference, and we have to be honest about that. But folks, the sense that I get is that for as long as most of us can remember, we know that we're a small conference made up of relatively small churches and relatively small communities, but that we have cultivated and curated a very healthy inferiority complex about our smallness. Or maybe I should say a very unhealthy inferiority complex about our annual conference. One of the life lessons that I've learned in the last 2 years is you always win the game that you're playing. You always win the game that you're playing. And when we play at being small, when we act small and think small and behave small and go around the world with our tail between our legs, the world is going to see us as small, treat us as small, and ignore us as small. We will win that game every time. And we will always bear small fruit. And so I ask the question, where on earth did we get the idea that being small is less than? Where on earth did we get that? We certainly didn't get that from the story of David and Goliath. In fact, when I served a small church in North Carolina, I spent some time going through this book to see where it is that God looks at something small and thinks it is less than or inferior or not up to snuff or not up to standards. And I had a really hard time finding anything in that book where God condemns or looks askance at or judges harshly smallness. Mustard seeds, small. Israel, small. Bethlehem, small. Nazareth, what good comes from Nazareth? Jesus had about 12 really close followers. At the end of his life, he had maybe a few hundred, and he upended the world. The only place where Jesus seems to criticize smallness is when it comes to the size of the faith of those who follow him. Ye of little faith, ye who have small faith. But friends, we look at what's going on outside of us. We look at what's going on in the general church. We look at what's going on in other annual conferences. We see these great videos that Bishop Schnase showed us. And even from the local church perspective, we look at the church down the road. We look at the Baptist church or the non-denominational church, and it's like, man, they've got it going on. What is wrong with us? And when we do that, we commit the sin of comparison. We commit the sin of comparison, and comparison never sees us in a favorable light. All we can see is our faults. All we can see is our failings, our shortcomings, our weaknesses. We magnify our perceived shortcomings, and we minimize our strengths, our gifts, our calling, our ministry. And the body of Christ, that is the United Methodist Church in West Texas and New Mexico, develops a case of body dysmorphia. You know what that is? When you look at your body and you don't see it the way it really is, you see something else. And you magnify what you think are the things wrong with you. and you minimize the things that are really there. And it's a sickness. We distort who God called us and created us to be as the New Mexico Annual Conference. We distort what God has called and created us to be as local churches in this area. And we fail, friends, we fail to prepare for the giant that waits for us. Well, let me hold a mirror up to us and give you some truth. 140 congregations stretch from West Texas to Arizona through New Mexico and even into Utah. Did you know we have churches in Utah? That means we have a connection that blankets this entire area in a way that is second only to the Roman Catholic Church in terms of the grasp of our reach, of how far we can stretch out and share the love of God with our neighbors and sisters and brothers in Christ. We can reach out and meet the needs of the people of the Navajo Nation all the way from West Texas in the oil patch of Hobbs, America. We can have a Facebook post about a friend's mom who's in a hospital in Ruidoso, and one of our pastors goes and visits. We can have a fire in Cimarron where Mescalero and our people are ready to do whatever it takes, starting with prayer for those communities. We have a reach that we don't even begin to understand, that we don't even begin to live into, the capacity that we have to share the gospel of Jesus Christ in this area. Nobody can do it better than us. And we are able to come together, as Eddie Rivera is doing in the El Paso district, with missional groupings of churches coming together to commit to kingdom work bigger than any of those local churches could do by themselves. But that's just the potential. That's just what's possible. That's just the capacity that already exists there. Here's what's real. When Jeff was in this position, he started to shift the culture of our annual conference, and I hope that I've continued in that role and that work. To shift the work of our conference, to shift the culture of our conference staff and conference leadership to focus on a few small stones, priorities, tools for effectiveness in ministry. And we have focused on and we have doubled down on investing in things like leadership development through like creating a culture of renewal, through coaching certification for laity and clergy, for certified lay ministry training. We focused in and doubled down on and invested in congregational vitality through staffing for congregational vitality in our conference office with Sherry Lyon and now with Blossom Matthews. And efforts like the Healthy Church Initiative and offering trainings and workshops at annual conference and Messy Church and discipleship pathways and simplified structure. And we focused in on and doubled down on and invested in starting new things for new people in new places through the work of the New Church Development Committee. And since last year, mini grants for local churches to start something small, like a food truck, or a sports court, or Messy Church. And we have focused in on and doubled down on and invested in assessing and refining how we work as an annual conference, particularly through our tithe model and in how we budget, but by also rebooting and reimagining our engaging team, our equipping team, and our envisioning team. And folks, from where I sit, from what I see, it's starting to make a difference. It's starting to make a difference. And not just in the work at the conference level, but at the level of the local church. It's starting to make a difference where ministry meets the mission field in your communities. As an annual conference, we have an invigorated connection of 140 churches, and we are getting more and more and more proficient at and comfortable with and competent with these smooth stones. And because this is the state of the conference, let me give you some numbers. And I'm not sure if this is going to work because this is an animation, so we'll see how bad this slide looks. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Somewhere in there are some numbers. And there'll be a quiz later. First number I'm going to give you is 12. We have about 21 churches that have participated in some way, shape, or form in our Healthy Church Initiative. In the most recent iteration of that, HCI 2.0, where we assessed and refined what was really going to work in our annual conference, 12 churches participated in that. And as part of assessing and refining that work, we went back to those churches and say, what difference did it make? We asked the laity and clergy of those churches if it made a difference at all. 89% said yes. 89% said yes. There was a shift in momentum. There was something that moved. Our leadership were able to catch sight of something bigger than church as we've always done it. And the story that you heard from First Roswell, Sandy, am I correct? Some of the work that came out of HCI planted the seeds that made that possible, that young man coming to faith in Christ because of that community and what they experienced with HCI. The second number is 75. As of this year's annual conference session, we have trained 75 people as certified lay ministers in our annual conference. 75. Give us a couple more years and we'll have more certified lay ministers than we have active clergy. Amen? And I tell you what, I will put our CLM training and our CLM ministers up against any annual conference in the connection. We are not living small with our certified lay ministers. The next number is a big number. It's $35,532, and that's in dollars. $35,532. That's how much we overspent our budget last year in 2017. $35,000 in a $2.5 million budget. And what that means is that we took $35,000 out of our stabilization fund to make budget last year. Folks, 5 years ago, we were on the precipice of spending our stabilization fund down to nothing. And because of your faithfulness in tithing and committing to being part of this enterprise that is the New Mexico Annual Conference and faithfully sending in your tithes and supporting the ministries of the church in this way, and because our CFNA has worked hard to budget within our means, we are in better financial shape as an annual conference than we have ever been in recent memory. Amen. The next number is 54, and this is a good news, bad news kind of thing. I'll give you the bad news first. 54 is the percentage of our annual conference's payout in shared ministries to the general and jurisdictional church. That's our fair share for ministries beyond our annual conference and the ministries that stay in our annual conference, because most of our shared ministries actually stay here. 54%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bishop, but that is the lowest of any annual conference in North America. And it has been that way for a long time. And that's what it looks like when you live small and when you play small. You pay 54% when everybody else is paying 100%. But because of your faithfulness to the tithe, because of your support of our shared work together, our 2019 budget that's before you this week has us paying 100% of our general and jurisdictional apportionments in full, because we are not living small anymore. And here's the good news. That was good news, but here's even better news. 54% just happens to be the percentage of churches in our annual conference last year that were either stable in worship attendance or growing in worship attendance. Did you hear me about that? More than half of our churches are either holding their own in worship attendance or growing in worship attendance. Folks, I would put that up against any other annual conference in the connection right now too. We are not playing small anymore. And that number has been increasing every year for the last 3 years, and is the highest it's been since 2001. What would it look like if that 54% turned into 100%? We would not be small anymore. Friends, this is what it looks like when we know ourselves, when we know what we need and we commit to the tools and the skills and the resources that will serve us as the New Mexico Annual Conference and as local churches in this area well, when we understand what our laity and clergy really need to be effective in ministry, to make a difference in the lives of their community and clergy, to begin the process of further assessing and refining our work as an annual conference with the intention of bringing to next year's annual conference session a report, a proposal, a strategic vision and plan for the future of the New Mexico Annual Conference that will carry us all forward in mission and ministry. And folks, it's not rocket surgery, as Bishop Shanese is likely to say. It's not rocket surgery. It's going to be the same stuff that we've been investing in the last few years, but we are going to take a hard look at what we've been doing and what we can do better and more of to make a difference in the lives of our local churches so that they can make a difference in the lives of our communities. so that you will be prepared to face your giants. And here's my last thought. We might think that General Conference or the way forward is the giant that we really need to be preparing ourselves for. We might think that 2019 is the giant that waits for us. But like Bishop Sneezy asked earlier today, at the end of February next year, when the dust is settled on whatever the way forward looks like for us as a denomination, there will still be giants of the hundreds of thousands of people in our communities who still need to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. There will still be the giants in our communities of poverty and hunger and despair and doubt and despondency. There will still be the giants of all the people who do not have a saving relationship with Jesus Christ, who do not have a faith community to be a part of that makes a difference in their lives. Those are the giants. Those are the giants that I want us to face and be honest about that and be prepared to face and be equipped to face. But that's something we're going to have to do together. We have to be real about who we are and what we need and what we face. Amen.
Amen.